This is BBC Two with Jeremy Paxman and Newsnight.
16 Israelis murdered as the Arab summit fails to get to grips with the latest peace initiative. It's a bleak Passover in the Middle East. Good evening. The armed wing of the Palestinian Hamas organization claimed responsibility tonight for the latest atrocity in Israel, in which 16 people having dinner were murdered. In Beirut, meanwhile, the Arab summit search for peace descends into chaos. We report from there and talk to the chief Palestinian negotiator. ITV Digital goes belly up. Football clubs may go under, but could the whole government plan for the future of British television go the same way? Naomi Campbell is judged a liar but wins her court battle against the Mirror. Where's the line now between inquiry and intrusion? The Mirror's editor argues it out with the Hello habitué Lauren Booth.
Where's that bloody Chinese flying horse then?
What did he say?
He said get out.
And the comedian Dudley Moore has died. This morning, the Arab world presented a peace plan to Israel and the United Nations at a summit in Beirut. Tonight, a suicide bomber walked into a busy hotel in the Israeli town of Netanya and blew himself up, killing 16 people and injuring more than 100. A short while ago, an Israeli government spokesman said this about the attack.
This comes after 2 weeks of Israeli attempts to help General Zini, after 2 weeks of Israeli restraint, although we had major terrorist attacks here, and this is the answer. We will have to decide what the right response will be, because it is the obligation of the Israeli government to protect its people.
Well, we go to Beirut shortly. First, though, let's hear from the BBC's Nick Childs in Jerusalem. Nick, what can you tell us about what happened?
Well, Jeremy, essentially it created a great stir here precisely because this was a very sensitive time in Israel, the start of Passover, in spite of all the security, the heightened security, because people had been bracing themselves for this sort of thing. A man walked into a crowded hotel, crowded because it was hosting, like many other hotels around the country, a Passover meal for the start of this sacred Israeli holiday, this sacred Jewish holiday. And as you say, he blew himself up. And as well as the 16 dead, there are scores of casualties. And the sensitivity and the shock here is very considerable, in spite of the fact that it was, to some extent, feared and expected because of all the tensions around whether or not Mr. Arafat would or wouldn't go to the Arab League summit, the fact that the American peace mission seemed to be faltering. In spite of all that, another suicide bomber seemed to get through.
There is a pattern, isn't there, to these events, that there will now presumably be inevitably some sort of Israeli retaliation.
There's been nothing official yet from the Israeli government, but government sources make it plain that some sort of response is inevitable. As you say, the question is at what level. There had been hints before all this happened with the tensions that if there was another bombing like this, there would be an even more massive response than we've seen in the past. And certainly right-wingers are pressing for that, will be pressing for that. But precisely because of the alarms this will create around the world that this whole situation could unravel again, there will almost certainly be an extreme amount of pressure on the Israeli government not to go too far. Even the Americans are saying that they would understand some sort of response, but I'm sure the telephone lines are very hot to Mr. Sharon's office to say that it should be as limited as possible.
And just very quickly, the Saudi peace plan, is it playing at all there?
Well, even before this bombing, I think, although some Israelis were being polite about it, some were showing some enthusiasm for it, not Mr. Sharon, one has to say. The fact that the Israelis were witnessing what they considered to be something of a shambles unraveling in Beirut, the fact that key moderates like King Abdullah of Jordan and the Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak weren't at the summit, they felt was already devaluing what was ever going to come out of the summit. And now the question is, for the Israelis, once again, security must come first.
Nick, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's go now to Beirut, the scene of the summit, and join our correspondent there, Frank Gardner. What's the mood up there tonight after this latest bombing?
Well, it's pretty gloomy. It was gloomy even before the bombing. The bombing actually took place after the delegates here had adjourned for their second session. They spent the day discussing the Saudi peace plan. But I think it only underlines, Jeremy, the fact that during this whole the recent 18-month conflict between Israel and the Palestinians, that events really are governed by what happens on the ground, that you can take one step forward in international diplomacy and you slide one step backwards the next time there's an outrage either in Israel or the Palestinian territories. So it's very gloomy, and I think it further underlines the urgency with which the Arabs need to get their act together and come up with a credible peace plan that's going to work.
Now, just talk us quickly through what happened there at the summit today.
Well, I would describe it, Jeremy, as a kind of a case of fiddling while Rome burned, frankly. There was a lot of confusion. There was a lot of precious time wasted while the Palestinians and the Lebanese argued and bickered over whether Yasser Arafat would be allowed to present his speech live in a video broadcast from Ramallah. In the end, he wasn't allowed to. So Yasser Arafat went ahead and broadcast anyhow, and then the Palestinian delegation walked out in a huff. I mean, all this at a time when the Middle East is going up in flames. It's frankly pretty irresponsible. Now, on the ground, at the same time, we went down to go and have a look at one of the refugee camps where there are thousands of Palestinian refugees. These people have been there since 1948 when they were first evicted. And I can tell you that whatever happens here at the summit, these people are angry. They feel extremely bitter about the summit. Protest against the summit in a Lebanese refugee camp. Armed and angry, these are the forgotten few, the thousands of Palestinians whose families were evicted from Israel half a century ago. What they're saying about Arab rulers is not repeatable. They feel neglected and betrayed. Now they fear a compromise peace deal will mean they can never go home. We're not expecting anything from the Arab summit, says this man, but we're afraid that the leaders are going to give in to the Israelis and sell us out. The Arab rulers have done nothing towards the victory of our people, he says. We urge them and the Islamic leaders to look after us. That's all we want. But in the murky politics of the Middle East, it's often hard to decipher fact from fiction. Take, for example, the confusing raft of rumors circulating at this summit.
Your Excellency, what about rumors about the Saudi delegation walking out of the summit?
Could you explain, Minister, could you explain in English what has happened with the Palestinian delegation?
Yes, I have a question about whether the summit is going to end today. This is something.
In fact, at one point, the summit seemed to be on the verge of total collapse, with no-shows, accusations, counter-accusations, and the Palestinian delegation walking out in a huff.
Our Palestinian friends did want their chairman to speak first, and when they saw that the list was long before the use of video would be done, they sort of lost patience.
And all this time, the two key Arab players have been conspicuously absent. Yasser Arafat refused to meet Israel's security conditions and so remains bottled up in the West Bank. Egypt's President Mubarak has also stayed away, claiming a lame domestic excuse. Insiders say he didn't want to come here and be harangued by Syria for not cutting ties with Israel. Whatever the outcome of this summit, it's painfully obvious that the Arabs are still divided amongst themselves. Summits like this are supposed to present a united Arab front to Israel and to the rest of the world. Instead, Arab differences have been embarrassingly exposed, and that shows how hard it's going to be to find a final formula that's acceptable to all Arab states. But recent history of Arab disunity shows us that's hardly surprising. When Egypt broke ranks and made peace with Israel in 1979, it was ostracized by its fellow Arabs for years. Today, the Arab world is still split between those countries which have made peace and those that oppose it. Then came the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait. Egypt and the Gulf states fought a war against Iraq. Yemen and the Palestinians were seen as siding with Saddam. And now, simmering beneath the surface, is another more subtle division in Arab ranks. In a region without democracy, there is an ever-widening gulf between these rulers and their people.
the problem is between Arab regimes. And you know that the Arab regimes are not democratic regimes, and so that they cannot carry out carry on implementing and what people want, what Arab people want. The problem is that the differences between the agendas, the differences between the rulers, and the lack of unity is going to be a long, long story.
The Arabs can ill afford disunity at such a critical time in the Middle East. After 18 months of mounting Arab-Israeli violence, this summit is focusing on a land for peace proposal put forward by the Saudi Crown Prince. Prince Abdullah's peace plan offers normal Arab relations with Israel. In exchange, the Arabs want full Israeli withdrawal from Arab land. They want recognition of an independent Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. And they want the return of Palestinian refugees. In the camp where some of those refugees live, I was taken to see one of the bitterest critics of both the peace plan and the summit. Assalamu alaikum. Colonel Munir al-Makta is Yasser Arafat's top soldier in Lebanon. He's a classic revolutionary, 41 years old, raised in the camps, a man who believes that violence is the only way to win back his country.
We do not agree with any of the decisions that come out of this summit. We have experience of previous summits. They're always making promises and decisions that are never implemented. We don't want any strategic peace with the Israeli enemy.
So what hope is there for Middle East peace after this summit? With the world watching, the pressure is on to come up with a solution fast. But after all that's gone wrong, I asked one delegate if the Saudi peace plan can really make a difference.
I think with the blessing have from the Arab leaders and the international family, maybe it will be a good start for everybody.
So you're optimistic?
I hope so. I am crossing my finger.
That's an optimism that few share. Certainly not here in the refugee camps, and almost certainly not across the border in Israel and the Palestinian territories, where 50 years of violence and hatred show no sign of abating.
Frank Gardner. Now, the Palestinian Authority condemned tonight's bombing, but said Israeli occupation bred terrorism. I spoke to the chief Palestinian negotiator, Saeb Erekat, before news of the attack. I asked him exactly what happened today to make it impossible for Mr. Arafat to speak to the Arab League.
Well, actually, the speech was scheduled to be after Prince Abdullah of Saudi Arabia, and we prepared all the technical issues for it through the satellite. And it was very evident that we wanted the speech to be after King Abdullah's or Prince Abdullah's speech, because President Arafat wanted to extend support, full support for the Prince Abdullah's peace ideas concerning the comprehensive peace and the comprehensive normal relations with Israel. Then we waited till speech after speech after speech, and then the president of the summit adjourned the meeting. At that point, we decided that President Arafat go directly with his speech, and we are still waiting for an explanation from the presidency of the summit. Our delegation to the summit, in protest, left the session. President Arafat instructed the delegation to remain in Lebanon.
Have you spoken to Mr. Arafat since he issued that instruction? I mean, what's his feeling? What's his mood?
His mood, you know, you have to keep in mind that the complexities that accompanied the despicable behavior of the Sharon government concerning his freedom of movement as provided for an agreement signed. Then the decision to address the Arab Summit through satellites. And what happened today, it wasn't easy. But, you know, the most important thing for President Arafat, as he said to us now, is to see to it that the Arab Summit succeeds and the resolution, especially concerning the adoption of the Saudi initiative, will go smoothly. And that's why we're exerting every possible effort to move in this direction in the next few hours.
That really is a pretty forlorn hope, isn't it? I mean, half the heads of government didn't bother to turn up for the summit. Some of the delegations are already leaving. Your own leader is prevented from speaking to the summit by satellite. This is going nowhere fast, isn't it?
I think each one has his own reasons, but at the end of the day, Prince Abdullah of Saudi Arabia delivered his speech, delivered his initiative. I think most of the other recommendations, aside from the real work that will take to put the ideas into a resolution, an Arab resolution, I think was prepared in advance. So now there is a committee of Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Lebanon, Palestine, I think Morocco, and plus the Secretary General of the Arab League that will concentrate its effort to change the Prince's ideas and to transfer them into a resolution.
It would, of course, be easier to get to some conclusion if Mr. Arafat himself was present in Beirut. I understand it's the Israelis who stopped him going, but can you explain to us why it is that Mr. Arafat refuses to order a ceasefire?
The ceasefire that the Tenet plan, that is emanating from the Tenet plan, is a requirement on both sides, on both leaders, once an agreement is reached, and Tenet as a package. And that's what we've been doing, and that's what we continue to do.
We recorded that interview a little earlier. Well, forgive the football analogy, but ITV Digital tonight is into extra time. The company went into administration while it figures out how to pay off £178 million it owes the English Football League. The league says that without cash payment for a 3-year deal to televise the lower divisions, many of the 72 clubs in it could go to the wall. The bigger picture is that it could also seriously dent the government's expressed wish to make Britain a digital TV nation by 2008. Paul Mason reports.
TV's commercial giants, non-premiership football and the government's broadcasting strategy itself. They all took a kicking today when ITV Digital went into administration. The screens won't go dark tonight, but at the cash-strapped broadcasting firm they're facing an uncertain future.
It's obvious that the weight of this financial burden has brought this platform to the brink of extinction. If that happens, there's every possibility that the Football League will get nothing, little or nothing. And perhaps even worse than that, going forward, there'll be no competition in the market when they want to sell their rights. And that's going to be an issue that's going to affect the Champions League, the Premier League, and everybody else who's trying to sell sports rights in this market.
ITV Digital is a joint venture between the two big commercial TV companies, Carlton and Granada. But they pulled the plug today, leaving the company facing insolvency. It's been beset by problems. Since its launch in 1998, it's only managed to build up 1.2 million subscribers. At least a quarter of them were leaving every year. It had technology problems. You can buy pirated smart cards at any car boot sale, and the picture was prone to freezing. ITV's bosses were left with an £800 million loss. Their biggest single outlay was money paid to the Football League for TV rights, £315 million over 3 years. With £178 million yet to pay, ITV Digital knocked it all on the head, offering just £50 million over the next 2 years.
I don't think digital TV is the failure. I think it's really the business plan that was followed by the owners of ITV Digital, Carlton and Granada. Right from the start, they made the mistake of going up against B-Sky B, the dominant player. They right away said they had the football, they had the films, and they couldn't play in the backyard of Rupert Murdoch.
Thanks to Mr. Murdoch's money, in the Premiership it will still be Porsches all round. But the 72 clubs of the Football League could be left with peanuts. 12 currently rely on the Players' Union to pay their wages. At least 12 could go bust in short order. At Queen's Park Rangers, they know what that means. They're already in administration, though hoping now that the worst is over.
Their administrator said he'd never seen the economics of the madhouse, but he had when he inherited our case. So I think one or two people probably haven't learnt lessons from the mistakes that we've made. And if they're beginning to sort of mortgage the future on the back of TV monies, and they've already paid it to the players, they're going to end up having one or two very difficult conversations with one or two very high-priced players and their agents.
The failure of ITV Digital kicks into touch not one, but two of the big business models of the 1990s. TV as something you pay for, and football as a kind of luxury spectacle for what the fans on the terraces call the prawn cocktail brigade. Both those business models will survive, but what we now know is they'll both have winners and losers. And with TV money drying up, the investment community's love affair with the beautiful game could also soon be on the wane.
All the trends from Europe have said that the prawn cocktail, as you refer, approach was only ever going to be applicable to a very small percentage of clubs. And if you look at the experience in Italy, it's clear that that pay-per-view experience has never really taken off. In my view, it will probably only be a significant revenue stream to half a dozen to a dozen clubs throughout Europe. The rest of us are going to have to band together to provide a product that people are prepared to buy into, or at least buy into in significant numbers.
The government's digital TV strategy now has more gaps in it than a Sunday League back four. The original plan was to switch off the analogue TV channels we've always relied on by 2008 and replace them with a choice of digital platforms.
There's always been a question for the government about the analog switch-off, the move to digital TV. That is, that cable is only available in 65% of homes. They won't build to the other homes in the Welsh Valley. And you had Sky as a satellite proposition, which meant that a lot of people didn't want to have a dish or couldn't have a dish if they were living in a listed building. So what would you do with the other people? And the answer was digital terrestrial television. So the government now has a big, big issue. It cannot switch off the old analog signal until it finds a means of getting to every single home in the country.
Out! Open the door! Can't you see my little woolly hands are full, you ninny? Where's the dish?
The monkey may now be under the protection of the Insolvency Court, but ITV Digital's licence is not. It goes back to the government to sell. So will any of broadcasting's big players be able to sort out the mess?
We have an interesting day of news today. We learned that NTL may not have enough money to get through its current period of restructuring. We know that Telewest, the other major cable company, is on its back. We know that Carlton and Granada are discredited as owners of pay TV operations. There aren't very many British solutions to the digital TV impasse. Sky can't own it. There's no way that Murdoch will be allowed to own the digital terrestrial platform. So I think the answer is going to be money from the city, some new management, and someone with a really keen idea of what to do with this.
Waiting in the wings could be European media giants Bertelsmann or Vivendi, but ultimately the Culture Secretary, Tessa Jowell, will shape the outcome. She was urging football clubs to keep talking tonight, because if digital terrestrial TV goes wrong, she will be, as they say in football, as sick as a parrot.
Or a pigeon. Well, earlier today, our political editor Martha Carney interviewed the Culture Secretary, Tessa Jowell. She began by asking the Secretary of State for her reaction to today's decision.
It's a great pity. It's not a surprise. Obviously, over the last few weeks, I've kept very closely in touch with the developments at ITV Digital and have been very well aware of the difficulties that the company has faced. What I think is important about today's, I think, constructive announcement is the security of supply for the 1.2 million viewers of ITV Digital.
There are huge implications for football clubs. As many as a third could go bankrupt because of this. You're also Minister for Sport. Are you going to be offering any kind of money as support to those clubs?
Well, football is a very rich game, and this is very clearly a problem for football.
Well, it's only rich in some areas and very poor clubs too.
My message to football is to keep talking to the Nationwide League, which is the of the three leagues that are particularly affected by the ITV Digital settlement, to keep talking and to keep negotiating. But what is also absolutely clear is that there is a longer-term challenge for football in addressing the fundamental weaknesses that many clubs face in their financial base.
But are you ruling out any help for those clubs for long-term support in their financial base?
Well, you know, we have in this context as government to look at football as if it were an industry like any other. And it's an industry that is facing difficulty that hasn't just arisen as a result of the ITV Digital going into administration.
So no lame ducks?
these are difficult. I mean, it's important to understand the long history of these difficulties. And, you know, clubs have been faced with the prospect of administration. You know, clubs are facing very high wage bills, you know, in some cases unaffordably high wage bills, which they feel are risks worth taking in many cases in order to improve their chances of promotion. All these are gambles and judgments which are taken by the game. But having had extensive discussion with those who are directly involved with football, I think that the game recognises that this is their responsibility to sort out.
OK, well, let's look at the other area of your responsibility. Doesn't today's decision blow an enormous hole in the government's digital strategy? I mean, how can you remain on target for switching off analogue?
Well, the time frame for switching off analogue and digital switchover is between 2006 and 2010. And we're taking all the steps that government can take in order to secure switch off within that time frame. But there's a tremendous amount to be done, and there are very clear tests that we will have to meet in order for switchover to take place during that time frame.
But are you saying that today's decision has made no difference to that whatsoever?
Well, I remain confident that we can secure switchover within the time frame that we've already indicated that we're working to. Of course, today's announcement, you know, is a problem, but I don't believe that it's a problem which is going to put that long-term time frame, that long-term objective in jeopardy.
Looking at the public interest considerations in this, does it not concern you that you could end up in a situation where Sky, where the satellite part of this digital age, becomes the most important monopolistic provider?
Well, again, you know, we have a very healthy and effective competition policy in this country.
So you would intervene?
A competition, well, I mean, the rules of competition would, of course, intervene to constrain the development of an unhealthy monopoly for the reasons that you suggest.
Well, we asked for an interview with either ITV Digital or its parent companies Granada and Carlton Television, but they all declined to come on and explain what happens next. However, I am joined by Keith Harris, chairman of the English Football League. You, effectively, I suppose, have driven this poor company to the wall. Is that something that troubles you?
Well, I feel a bit like a pawn in a company where the management might be claimed to have been irresponsible or incompetent, but I don't think our actions have driven them to the wall, no.
Well, they paid far too much to televise your matches. That's what's done for them.
But I think we all know that the markets move in cycles. Looking back 2 years was the height of a boom from where we sit today. Looking forward 2 years, it's fine to hear the broadcasters talk down the figure, but we do know what happens when there's bidding fervour for a product which is attractive to television.
Yeah, but you could have gone with ITV, Channel 4, Channel 5, the BBC, instead of which you chose to go for this unknown operator, and, you know, you've reaped the whirlwind.
We went with two of the largest media companies in Britain.
On a totally unknown means of distribution?
We went with Carlton and with Granada, and with their investment in a form of television which the government has been highly supportive of, terrestrial digital television. Now, if you can't trust companies in the FTSE 100 and the FTSE 250, worth today £5 billion, worth then many more times that, then it's a sad statement, I think.
So you will pursue a claim against those parent companies, Granada and Carlton?
We have absolutely no option but to do that. This is money that's contracted to finance football clubs for a 3-year period. 7 months into it, they've discovered that they don't fancy it any longer. And whether that's for a corporate agenda, I don't know. We can't read behind.
You've seen the books. It just doesn't add up. They can't afford it.
Well, 10 years ago, Sky was on the verge of financial collapse when they started to invest in satellite television. 10 years on, it's been very successful, and football has been a key element in selling satellite dishes. They are 7 months into a programme. They should have known that the path to terrestrial digital television being a success was going to be a long one.
So you're going to fight this through the courts?
We will have to fight it through the courts unless we get the settlement that we need.
And how big a claim is that likely to be against Carlton and Granada?
Well, we have a short-term imperative to recover the cash that we believe is ours in any event. Should it go to court, there will be collateral damage, there will be ancillary claims, because football is a business today. It's not just about young lads running around playing football. It's about sponsorship, it's about obtaining money from sources, major commercial companies, and if their products aren't advertised on television by players wearing shirts with their names on them, then they're going to withdraw that sponsorship, and that is an additional source of income which we fear will disappear.
So you're talking about a claim which might run to several £100 million.
It's certainly well in excess of the £180 million that we're owed.
How many clubs do you think could go to the wall in the meantime?
I think the short-term impact could be between 10 and 15 clubs being driven to a position where they have to seek protection from their creditors, just as ITV Digital has done. And that's a short-term impact. Now, these clubs frequently now are companies. So just like Granada and Carlton, they have shareholders as well. So they have to be aware of that. I think the longer-term fallout could reach as many as 30 of our football clubs.
Could go to the wall?
Could go to the wall, yes. And it doesn't take all 30 to go to the wall to cause the disruption, because obviously the league is about one club playing another club.
Keith Harris, thank you. Well now, the damages she was awarded, £3,500, won't be enough to keep her in lip gloss for a week, but Naomi Campbell did win a significant victory in the courts today. She'd taken on the Mirror for breaking confidences and invading her privacy by revealing her drug use. In the process, she was exposed as a liar and one furthermore prepared to lie under oath. But the judge's decision that even those who expose themselves in the media are entitled to some privacy is being touted as redrawing the limits of media inquiry. In a moment, we'll talk to the Mirror's editor. First, though, here's Liz McKean.
In the everlasting hunt which sees celebrities as prey, this is the weapon of choice. And this is the man who wields it, Salvatore Mancuso, a member of the dreaded paparazzi. Whatever the impact of today's ruling, he says the hunt is a mere game and celebrities are willing participants.
They do make sure that we know exactly when they go out, where they go. But as soon as they see us, they just pretend or put an act inventing the fact that we were there without them realizing or knowing.
One of the world's most photographed women has now established that even when a celebrity plays the publicity game, they're still entitled to privacy. Naomi Campbell's solicitor claimed a stunning victory.
It's clearly a landmark decision. The case establishes that if you're in the public eye, whether through choice or inadvertence, you're nevertheless entitled to protection for your private life.
In an interview from the States, Ms. Campbell said the trial had been an ordeal.
I wouldn't wish this on anyone, what happened to me, because I felt, I felt raped then. I felt like if I can't take care of this problem, then, you know, I can't get myself better, and that's the main point here.
But the damages awarded to Naomi Campbell, just £3,500, suggest her victory is not so resounding after all. In his judgment, Mr. Justice Moreland branded the supermodel a liar, saying she lacked frankness and veracity with the media, or to use the Mirror's vernacular, she told whoppers. He finds that the Mirror did nothing wrong in publishing the basic facts that Naomi Campbell had a drug habit and was getting treated. But he said the paper went too far in using a photograph of the model, leaving a meeting of Narcotics Anonymous, and in revealing details of the treatment. These were a breach of confidentiality and a breach of the Data Protection Act.
What the judge has decided is that a certain part, and a very small part, of what the Daily Mirror published was subject to a confidence. And in that sense, Naomi Campbell has succeeded. But had they run the story simply as Naomi Campbell receiving treatment for a drug problem, there wouldn't have been a case.
For a nation of shrinking violets, it's perhaps surprising that we in Britain don't have a definite law on privacy. In fact, compared with other countries, our press enjoys pretty much an open season. What we do have is a series of cases brought by celebrities and a series of judgments. The question is, do they offer any sort of consistent guide as to where newspapers should draw the line? In 1987, the Sunday Sport published pictures of the actor Gordon Kay comatose in hospital. The court found that he had no right to privacy. In 2000, Catherine Zeta-Jones and Michael Douglas won the right to sue Hello magazine for publishing photos of their wedding. In effect, a right to privacy was established by adapting the law of confidence. Not every celebrity has been so lucky. The BBC presenter Jamie Theakston recently failed under the same law to prevent his visit to a brothel being made public. And in an ongoing case, a footballer known as Mr. A is frantically trying to stop the Sunday People naming him as an adulterer. Today, though, as in the Zeta-Jones case, the laws of confidence have come to a celebrity's aid. The picture is hardly consistent.
We are having law by piecemeal here. In a lot of ways, the ideal answer would be that we have an Act of Parliament passed, it identifies what is going to be subject to a right of privacy and what isn't, and we know where we stand. At the moment, we just have all these decisions, and of course, every decision stands on its facts. In other words, if the facts aren't similar, you can distinguish it, and it doesn't apply.
At Canary Wharf, the Sunday People is in the thick of the legal action, and not just because of the footballer case. The DJ, Sarah Cox, is going to court over publication of photos of her honeymoon. The editor says today's case won't cause any lost sleep.
It is a technical victory, but it's by no means a finding against the rights of newspapers to investigate public figures who behave badly. Only one group of people have won out of this, and this is the lawyers, who want there to be a privacy law. Naomi Campbell has lost big time. Naomi Campbell chose to pursue this case of a story that perhaps would have been forgotten within days and has now been splashed over not just every paper in this country, broadsheet or tabloid, television, radio, but all across the world.
Even so, all editors will have noted Mr. Justice Morland's comments that even self-publicists have a right to privacy. Just what this means in practice will be fought over in the raft of cases queuing up to be heard. And in the meantime, the press will continue to pick its way along the nebulous line that separates legitimate inquiry from unwarranted intrusion.
Well, we're joined now here in the studio by Lauren Booth, who appears writing and being photographed in various publications, and Piers Morgan, the editor of The Mirror. Piers Morgan, who actually won this case?
We did.
Although
she says she did. I mean, I think the bizarre thing about this is that who did win? I mean, Naomi Campbell won £3,000. She's worth millions.
And substantial costs.
She won a few grand in costs. We're quite happy to pay. It was a good, cheap bit of advertising. She's come away with a landmark ruling, which is that in future, rather than being sympathetic to celebrities by saying they're bravely facing up and heroically battling their drug problem, we will simply just have to expose them. If that is a victory for celebrities, good luck.
What was interesting, I thought, about the judge's ruling was the way in which he said that even those who courted publicity were nonetheless entitled to a degree of privacy. Now, this is something you've done yourself, Lauren Booth, isn't it? I mean, here we are, we're OK Magazine. In this one, you introduce us to your boyfriend. In this one, you introduce us to your miscarriage. In this one, you introduce us to your pregnancy. And in this one, you introduce us to your child. Now, at what point, having done that, are you entitled to say, back off?
Well, there are moments. I mean, you can say that publicity is a part of somebody who's in the public eye's life. The fact that perhaps Piers Morgan is on this show tonight, does that, talking about privacy, could be said by an editor to...
He's not talking about his private life, though.
There is privacy in the sense of, I'll take the example of Sarah Cox. She certainly has posed for men's magazines, but when she is naked on a private beach with her husband, nobody else is supposed to see that. There's a professional business deal that is done between the papers and magazines and people in the public eye, and there is private time. These people are not animals. They are, as the judge said, allowed some amount of personal privacy.
And yet the judge also said there was a need for the public to be told about what these people were really like.
I think if there's hypocrisy, I think that's the basic argument that everyone can agree in. If you say one thing and do another, that has been the tabloid's stronghold. But at the same time, what is interesting to the public is not always in the public interest.
No, that's a hoary old thing. The judge said there was it was his word, need, wasn't
this
it?
is the key to the whole day. I mean, what a farce. Here you have Justice Moreland saying the public had not a duty or a right, but a need to know. In other words, they had a desperate need to know she was a drug addict. I agree with him, because actually she'd gone on national television and said, I've never taken drugs. Further, he said, they have a need to know that she was receiving treatment. So the Mirror publishes a story which says Naomi Campbell is a drug addict and is bravely battling her problem by receiving treatment. However, we committed the fatal error of adding the words Narcotics Anonymous. This photograph we published, we pixelated the faces of everybody else. We didn't say even what country this picture had been taken in. We went to every step that I could possibly have done
I know.
to
You've been an absolute hero, but
not a hero, but let's try and get this in perspective. Naomi Campbell repaid what I thought was a pretty sympathetic, nay, compassionate approach to this story compared to what she says we could have done, which was she's a sleazy drug addict
in the way
and she's thrown it back in our faces.
I say it's a very in the way that you reveal, the tabloids will reveal that someone is a homosexual in a compassionate piece. It's still blackmailing them into revealing information they didn't want to. That moment she was coming out of Narcotics Anonymous was her moment. It may have damaged her getting better. She hasn't been many times since.
Well, she seemed to be perfectly, if I may say so, she seemed to be fine at the Rio Carnival and fine at the Oscars.
Yeah, but you're not a doctor.
You're not
I'm not a doctor, but I'm telling you, Naomi Campbell has played a great game of bluff here, and she's lost big time, because actually what she has achieved is an attitude of mind from the newspapers that in future, when confronted with exactly the same story, we are now being directed, A, to
about
leave...
how to avoid it.
Wait
yes,
a minute.
I think I agree.
A, to leave out facts, which is a bizarre thing for a journalist to have to face up to. We must leave out facts and leave out a part of the truth of the story. And secondly, we must actually desist from being sympathetic. What sort of victory is that?
I think it is a totally Pyrrhic victory, and it is a bizarre case of the law not knowing which way to turn, because we have no specific direction. Nobody knows where it's going. But the main argument that's important for journalists is the privacy law. You don't want one that's brought in that will stop investigative journalism, that will stop people looking into the Arch case and the Aitken case. But there must be an acceptance by tabloid editors that there's a difference between photographing someone naked on a beach, photographing someone in their personal time, and investigative journalism. There must be a privacy basis or some sort of comeback for the person who has been wrong. Because this is not a comeback. Like you say, she's won nothing but a Pyrrhic victory.
Let me correct another wrong assumption, which Justice Moreland has also propagated, which is in some way we don't think that any celebrity has any right to privacy. I can think of a number of circumstances where we have rejected stories and photographs where I have felt that actually...
Probably only because they wouldn't sell papers.
No, the intrusion is simply not justified.
What sort of things?
Well, we already have in the Press Complaints Commission Code a number of areas. Private areas, restaurants, churches, private villas, if you like, gymnasiums, where there is a general expectation of privacy.
Drug rehab places?
Well, the whole issue of here, I think, was our justification was hypocrisy, was lying. I mean, she lied.
But you must accept now you went too far.
No, I don't.
That's what the courts have found.
I don't accept it at all. And I find it utterly ridiculous that Justice Moreland has said we were right to expose her, right to say she's having treatment, but the mere addition of the words, all we said was she's going to NA. It's the world's most famous treatment for narcotics.
If you keep pushing the boundaries like this, by making these judgments against you, they go against you, and they has gone against you today, then there will be forced a draconian law that nobody wants through the Lords. Somebody will have to take action, and then everybody will be up in arms saying,
that's the
this
problem,
privacy law.
The whole thing is being made up by judges as we go along.
Well, I think we had a problem with Justice Moreland from day one when he was leaping up and down helping her with her documents. I mean, we had a classic case of a judge who clearly preferred the celebrity to the tabloid newspaper, which is an ongoing issue. But in the question of are we going to bring in a privacy law? No, we are going to fight absolute tooth and nail every time we believe we have a fair case. I'm not here saying I want the right to invade every celebrity's every aspect of their privacy. I can think of a number of aspects of your privacy that the readers simply aren't ready for. I don't want to do that. but I think people have to understand we are not on some witch hunt to invade people's lives. However, if they're going to stand on national television and say, I've never taken drugs, and we know they're drug addicts, we have a right to say that.
I think we'll let you two explore your areas of privacy downstairs. Right, tomorrow's front page is coming up in just a moment. Before that, though, a roundup of today's news. Our main story tonight, 16 Israelis have been killed and 100 injured when a Hamas suicide bomber blew himself up in a hotel. The attack comes as Arab leaders are discussing a comprehensive peace deal with Israel. America's warned its citizens who live in 4 Italian cities that they could be the target of terrorist attacks on Easter Sunday. The cities at risk are Venice, Florence, Milan and Verona. The State Department said it had received credible reports that extremists were planning terrorist actions. Places of worship, restaurants, schools and outdoor events were listed as possible targets. The European Union has approved a package of tariffs intended to protect Europe's steel producers from an unexpected upsurge in imports. The moves are a response to President Bush's move to slap surcharges of up to 30% on most steel coming into the United States. European countries fear that'll lead to other steelmakers redirecting their exports into the EU. And the markets, the FT 100 share index was up. In New York, the Dow Jones closed up against the euro. The pound was up against the dollar. The pound was down. And tomorrow morning's front pages, the Independent, bomber kills 15 in Passover feast massacre. That death toll's now gone up to 16. And a picture of Dudley Moore, who has just died. The Times goes with the crisis in ITV Digital, which has been put into administration, and also a picture of Dudley Moore on its front page. The Telegraph has a different picture of Dudley Moore and leads with the same story about ITV firms pulling the plug on the digital service, which began as On Digital, and the Financial Times has the same lead, turmoil as ITV Digital goes into administration. And Gordon Brown's apparently going to reaffirm his commitment to enterprise in the budget, and the Sun's headline on the death of Dudley Moore is Dud's dead. Well, that's all from Newsnight tonight. There'll be more on all the stories we've covered on BBC News 24. I'll be back tomorrow, but until then, before we go, a short tribute to the comedian and musician Dudley Moore, who died today after a long illness. Good night.
Mr. Spigot.
Oh, yes, Spigot by name, Spigot by nature.
Good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. There's no need to follow me everywhere.
Oh, right.
Mr. Spigot, you are auditioning, are you not, for the role of Tarzan?
Right.
Good evening. There were very few exceptions to the spring sunshine today, and Leeds topped the table with both temperatures and sunshine amounts nearly 12 hours, and 16 Celsius is 61 Fahrenheit. There were exceptions, however. The fringes of northern and western Scotland near this weather front here, the exceptions to the rule. And although high pressure will continue our spell of fine weather for Thursday, for Friday too, and even into Saturday, by the time we get to Easter Sunday, we're back to the old routine, I'm afraid, of low pressure pushing in weather fronts off the Atlantic, more cloud and more wind for many of us. So it is set to go downhill through the second half of the weekend. It's not all bad news because at least Good Friday is looking warm and sunny for most, and Easter Saturday for many holding on to that dry and fine weather. And certainly for the meantime, with high pressure with us through the remainder of the night, it'll turn a little bit misty in places, some local fog patches from southern Scotland southwards really, because in the north we keep quite a bit of cloud, and so temperatures holding up here. But it's set to turn chilly once again in rural areas, temperatures dipping down to freezing or below, especially in central parts of England and through parts of Wales too. That means we'll start the day on another bright note, though only little bits of morning mist and fog clearing in no time at all, and then it's virtually a repeat performance of the day today. Again, a little bit more cloud hugging the Outer Hebrides and the Isle of Shetland too, bringing the odd spot of rain drizzle, even a little bit of cloud floating along the south coast from time to time. And if the sun does come out, and we've still got we've still got that chilly breeze in the south, it will actually feel quite cold, but 14 or 15 light today, really rather pleasant indeed. Of course, the exception, as I explained earlier, will be the northern and the western Isles. Much of a repeat performance for Good Friday. Again, plenty of warm sunshine into Saturday too, although the hint of a change, as you can see, in Glasgow and in Belfast. And then by Easter Day, it starts to turn much more unsettled with a spell of rain for many places, and that's as this weather system rolls in off the Atlantic. Increased winds. In fact, Easter Monday at this stage is looking pretty wet, but we'll keep you posted. Bye-bye.